The evening had settled softly over the neighborhood, wrapping the small house in a blanket of fading gold and deepening blue. I sat near the window in my old wooden chair, knitting slowly, the steady rhythm of needles tapping together blending with the faint ticking of the wall clock. Outside, the street was calm, only the distant bark of a dog and the whisper of wind brushing through the trees. It was the kind of quiet I had grown used to, the kind that usually brought peace. But that night, peace did not last. A sudden, hurried knock shattered the silence. Not once, but again and again, fast, desperate, trembling. My hands froze. Visitors were rare at this hour, and something about that knock made my heart tighten. I rose slowly, my knees aching, and walked toward the door. Before opening it, I asked softly, "Who is it?" No answer. Only another weak knock. I opened the door. Little Sarah stood there, her small figure shaking, her school bag hanging loosely from one shoulder. Her eyes were swollen and red, tears still clinging to her lashes. Her lips trembled as if words were trying to escape, but fear held them back. "Grandma," she whispered, and then suddenly threw herself into my arms. "I'm scared." Her tiny hands clutched my dress so tightly it felt as if she would never let go. I held her close, feeling her heartbeat racing against mine. Sarah was not a fearful child. She laughed loudly, spoke boldly, and slept peacefully even during thunderstorms. To see her like this, pale, trembling, broken, filled me with a deep, cold worry. "What happened, my child?" I asked gently, pulling her inside and locking the door behind us. She struggled to breathe between sobs. "Daddy went on a trip yesterday. Mommy is at work." I was alone, and someone was in the house. A chill ran through my spine. "Did you see them?" I asked, kneeling to her level. She shook her head slowly. "No, but I heard footsteps, slow, walking near my room." The house suddenly felt colder, quieter, heavier. I guided her to the sofa, wrapped a warm shawl around her shoulders, and brought her some water. Her hands trembled as she drank. "Did the doors open? Did anything break?" I asked carefully. "No, but I heard breathing. Near the door," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I checked the time. Her mother would not return for hours. My son-in-law was away on business, miles from home. The thought of Sarah alone in that house with unknown footsteps made my heart ache. "You are safe here," I told her softly. "No one will hurt you." That night, Sarah refused to sleep alone. She lay beside me, gripping my hand tightly, as if letting go would bring the darkness back. I stayed awake longer than usual, listening to every sound, the wind brushing the windows, the clock ticking, Sarah's uneven breathing slowly calming. But inside, a quiet fear had begun to grow. Something had frightened my brave little granddaughter. And whatever it was real. Sarah slept restlessly beside me, her fingers still wrapped tightly around mine, as though fear might return the moment she let go. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the night lamp near the corner. Shadows stretched across the walls like silent watchers, shifting slightly whenever the wind brushed against the window. I tried to close my eyes, but sleep refused to come. My mind replayed her trembling voice, her tear-filled eyes, her words, "Someone was in the house." Hours passed quietly until, sometime deep into the night, Sarah suddenly tightened her grip on my hand. "Grandma," she whispered urgently. I opened my eyes. "What is it, my child?" Her body was stiff, her eyes wide open, staring toward the bedroom door. "Listen." At first, I heard nothing, only silence. The heavy, deep silence of night. Then, faintly, a sound. A slow, dragging step. My breath stopped. Another step. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. Footsteps. My heart began to pound so loudly I feared Sarah could hear it. I slowly sat up, trying not to make a sound. The footsteps seemed to come from the hallway outside the room. Not fast. Not loud. Just slow, careful, as if someone didn't want to be heard. Sarah's nails dug into my arm. "He's here," she whispered, trembling violently. I swallowed my fear and reached for the flashlight beside the bed. "Stay here," I murmured, though my own voice shook. I stood and walked toward the door, every step heavy, every breath shallow. The sound had stopped now, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt alive. My hand trembled as I opened the door. The hallway was empty. No movement. No shadow. No sound. I stepped forward slowly, shining the flashlight along the walls, the floor, the corners. Nothing. The windows were closed, the front door still locked. The house looked exactly as it always did. And yet, I had heard it. I returned to the room. Sarah was sitting upright, her eyes fixed on me, fear still flooding her face. "No one is there," I said softly, though uncertainty lingered in my heart. She shook her head quickly. "He comes at night." My chest tightened. "Who, Sarah?" Her lips trembled. She looked toward the dark doorway, then back at me and whispered, "The man with no face." A cold shiver ran through me. "What do you mean?" I asked gently. But Sarah pulled the blanket over her head and refused to speak further. I lay beside her, holding her close, listening once more to the silence. And that silence no longer felt safe. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the curtains, casting soft golden lines across the room. Birds chirped outside, and the world seemed peaceful again, as if the fear of the night had never existed. But Sarah did not wake with her usual bright smile. She sat quietly at the table, staring into her glass of milk, her small fingers tracing invisible circles on the surface of the wood. I placed a warm parth on her plate and smiled softly. "Eat, my child. You need strength." She nodded, but barely touched her food. Her eyes looked tired, distant, carrying a fear far too heavy for someone so young. "Sarah," I said gently, sitting beside her, "tell me what you saw." She hesitated, then reached into her school bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Slowly, she opened it and slid it toward me. It was a drawing. A tall, dark figure stood near a small bed. The figure had long arms, long legs, and no face, only a blank shadow. Two small circles near the top seemed like empty eyes staring forward. I felt a chill rise in my chest. "That's him," Sarah whispered. "He stands near my door." "Did you see him clearly?" I asked carefully. "No, only shadow, but he watches," she said, her voice shaking. I tried to stay calm. Children imagine things sometimes, I told myself. Night shadows, fear, loneliness, they can turn into monsters in a child's mind. But then she said something that made my hands grow cold. "He knew Daddy wasn't home." I looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "He came after Daddy left, not before," she said quietly. My thoughts began racing. Could someone have been watching the house? Watching their routine? Waiting for the right moment? "Sarah, did he try to come inside your room?" She shook her head slowly. "No, he just walked, slowly, outside." I folded the drawing carefully, my heart heavy. Fear was no longer just in her imagination. It had taken shape, voice, and timing. Something or someone had frightened my granddaughter deeply. And I needed to know why. That afternoon, the air felt strangely heavy, as if the neighborhood itself carried a silent tension. Sarah stayed close to me, rarely speaking, her eyes often drifting toward the door as though expecting something to appear at any moment. I decided to step outside and speak with our neighbor, Mrs. Khan, hoping perhaps she had noticed something unusual in recent nights. Mrs. Khan was watering her plants when she saw me approaching. She smiled warmly at first, but her expression changed when I mentioned footsteps and strange noises. "You heard them too?" she asked quietly. My heart skipped. "Two." She lowered her voice and stepped closer. "2 houses down, Mrs. Rahman said she heard someone walking outside her windows last week. And across the street, old Mr. Bashir reported the same, always late at night." A cold unease spread through me. "Did anyone see who it was?" She shook her head slowly. "No, but all these things happened when the men of the house were away." Her words sent a sharp chill through my spine. "Are you saying someone is watching the neighborhood?" I asked. Mrs. Khan looked around before answering softly, "It feels like it." The wind rustled the leaves above us, creating a dry whispering sound that made my skin crawl. I thanked her and returned home, my mind heavy with worry. Sarah was sitting near the window when I entered. "Grandma, did you see him?" she asked nervously. "No, my child," I replied gently, though my voice lacked certainty. As evening fell, the house grew quieter than usual. Every small sound seemed louder: the ticking clock, the creaking wood, the distant bark of dogs. I locked the doors carefully, checked the windows twice, and pulled the curtains closed. Sarah stayed close, her fingers gripping my hand again. "Grandma, he comes when it's dark," she whispered. I held her tightly. Not tonight. But deep inside, fear had already entered the house. Night fell slowly, wrapping the house in deep silence. The wind outside had calmed, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost unnatural. I checked every door and window once more, ensuring each lock was firm. Sarah watched me anxiously, her small face pale in the dim light. "Everything is locked," I told her gently. She nodded but did not relax. That night, she insisted on sleeping beside me again. I lay awake longer than usual, listening to every tiny sound, every shift in the darkness. Time moved slowly. Then, sometime deep into the night, a faint metallic sound broke the silence. Click. My eyes snapped open. Sarah squeezed my arm instantly. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice trembling. Another sound. The front door handle moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Someone was outside. My heart pounded violently as I sat up. The handle shook once more, then stopped. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. "Stay here," I whispered to Sarah, though my own voice trembled. I stood carefully and walked toward the hallway, each step heavy, my breath shallow. The house felt colder with every step. When I reached the door, I stood still, listening. Nothing. I gathered courage and looked through the small peephole. Darkness. No one there. But I knew someone had touched that handle. After a long moment, I heard soft footsteps fading away outside. Whoever it was had left. I locked the door tighter and returned to Sarah. She was shaking uncontrollably. "He came again," she whispered. I held her close, but fear had already taken root. Morning arrived, but fear did not leave. The house felt different now, no longer safe, no longer calm. After Sarah ate a little breakfast, I stepped outside to check the yard. The air was damp, and the ground still held traces of last night's cold wind. Near Sarah's bedroom window, I stopped. Muddy footprints. Fresh. My heart began racing. Someone had been there, standing close to the window, watching. I hurried back inside and called my daughter at work. When she arrived, her face turned pale as I explained everything: the footsteps, the moving door handle, the footprints. She immediately called the police. Sarah clung to me tightly, her voice trembling. "Grandma, he was looking for something." "What do you mean?" I asked softly. She swallowed and whispered, "Daddy's office room." I looked toward the locked door down the hallway, the room my son-in-law never allowed anyone to enter. Fear turned into something deeper. Something was hidden. The police arrived quietly, their serious expressions filling the house with tension. One officer examined the muddy footprints, another checked the locks and windows. Everything showed signs that someone had been watching, not breaking in waiting. When Sarah mentioned her father's office, the officers exchanged glances. "May we see the room?" one asked. The door was locked as always. With my daughter's permission, they opened it carefully. Inside were shelves filled with files, a desk, and a small safe hidden behind a cabinet. One officer opened the safe. Inside, bundles of cash, documents, and a passport that did not belong to my son-in-law. The officer's expression hardened. Something is wrong here. Fear grew heavier in the room. That evening, the phone finally rang. It was my son-in-law. His voice sounded tense, uneasy. When my daughter mentioned police, he panicked. "Don't open anything. I'll explain when I come back." The call ended suddenly. Sarah whispered, "Grandma, he knows." That night, footsteps returned. But police were waiting. A shadow appeared near the window, then tried to escape. They caught him. He wasn't a ghost. He worked with my son-in-law. And he was searching for hidden money. Days later, the truth came out. My son-in-law had been involved in illegal dealings. The man who frightened Sarah was trying to recover hidden cash before police discovered it. My son-in-law was arrested. Peace slowly returned. One quiet night, Sarah hugged me and smiled softly. "Grandma, I'm not scared anymore." And for the first time in many nights, The house slept in silence.